New project economy news this morning from the U.S. Labor Department. The nation's economy created the largest number of jobs in March since the recession began, even though unemployment stayed at 9.7% for the third straight month. Employers added 162,000 jobs last month, the most in 3 years, but it was still below analysts' expectations. Also, more Americans say they were working part-time, even though they prefer full-time work. As always, on every Friday, we talk with the folks from UHERO, the University of Hawaii's Economic Research Organization. And joining us this morning is Professor Sumner LaCroix. He's an economics professor at UH. Good morning, Sumner, and thank you so much for joining us.
Morning, Maya.
So what do the latest numbers from the Labor Department mean to you and for folks here in the islands?
Well, I think that they're really good numbers. They're really good numbers because the growth in jobs was broad-based. It went across virtually all industries except for banking and finance. I think, in general, when we see mainland job growth, that means the tourists are going to be coming back to the islands a little bit faster. So I think what that says for us is that some expectations that we're going to have a slow but stable recovery over the next couple of years are more likely to hold true as we see these kind of numbers come forth.
It's interesting that you mentioned tourism because we just heard some big hotels this week are planning some big developments like the Hilton Hawaiian Village, and a lot of the hotels are putting major investments, so this could be a good word for the construction industry as well. But when things improve on the mainland, it still takes it a while to get to the islands, doesn't it?
Oh, it does. I mean, people aren't just going to spend on vacation overnight. They're going to take a look and see that their finances have been rebuilt. They're going to try to ask, is the job that I just got a permanent job, or is this something that's going to be temporary? It's going to take time for a recovery here. Right. But this is still really good news. We haven't seen this kind of job growth since 2007. Yeah, so, I mean, it's basically been all job losses.
Right.
All the way through 2008, 2009. There's been a couple months of very small growth. This is the first month where we hit triple digits growth in a long time.
All right. Also this morning, you wanted to talk about the ABCs of the general excise tax for Hawaii. So we're going to get a little lesson this morning, right, Sumner? Right. And, you know, the legislature is looking at some proposals to eliminate the exemptions for the GET. First of all, can you tell us how the tax works?
Well, basically, the tax is a gross business receipts tax. So anybody who runs a business, whatever revenues that you take in, basically are taxed. This means it has a very broad base. So if somebody sells a service, that's taxed. If somebody sells a good, that's taxed. So it's not the same as a sales tax. In states that have a sales taxes, it's just the goods that you buy over the counter. It's those tangible goods and services. Here, if you go to the dentist and they do a checkup, there may be nothing tangible done to your teeth, but you still get a bill for the get tax on that particular doctor's visit.
Right. So who exactly pays the get tax or the GE tax?
Now, one of the things that's really good about the tax is it's a broad-based tax and the rate is low. But it's basically a consumption tax. And because it's a consumption tax, what we tend to find is that the poor pay a higher percentage of their income as a general excise tax than the rich do. And so it tends to be a somewhat regressive tax. Now, that can be fixed. It can be fixed by giving income tax refunds, by basically engineering income tax refunds to be geared to people's get payments. We did that in the past. We've moved away from doing that. I think that's an unfortunate development. One really good thing about the get, about 20% of the get is paid by tourists. Okay. That can't be said for a lot of other taxes here in the state, but 20% of the get is paid by tourists. And right now we have such a low rate at 4% that, you know, a raise, it's 4.5% on Oahu. Right. But a raise to, say, 5%, it's not the kind of thing that's going to drive tourists away. So it's a highly efficient tax. It's borne by tourists, and even though it's a regressive tax, it's the type of thing that we can ultimately fix.
In terms of the exemptions, you know, the lawmakers are looking at a long list of exemptions, and should some activities be exempt from the tax?
Well, you know, it is possible that there should be some activities that should be exempt from the tax because they're of high social value, and we're trying to find a way to subsidize those activities. Most economists would tell you this is a bad way to do that subsidy. We should be doing more direct subsidies that are reviewed year by year. When I looked at the list of activities that was exempt, it was a long list. It's essentially built up over the year. Whenever we give out an exemption, we never seem to take it back. We never go through and review the list. And actually, this is a time where I think the legislature is absolutely doing the right thing here in looking at this exemption list, and that some of these exemptions I don't think make any sense.
Do you have any specifics? Like, can you give us an example of what's on that list?
Well, you know, aircraft maintenance is pretty high up there. I mean, we gave that to try to stimulate the aircraft maintenance industry. It wasn't clear that we wanted to give that tax break for all time. I think this is one of those areas where we got to think about taking it back. We give a tax break for buildings that are developed for high-tech purposes. Maybe that's something that's useful to do. at certain times in the economy. I've never been convinced that was a good tax in the first place. Now, like everything else, a lot of times where the money is, these are areas that we need to think twice about. One is prescription drugs. Okay. Another one is hospital services. Still, it's unclear to me why we tax part of health care and not the other part of health care. It seems to me that what we ought to try to do is keep the overall excise tax rate low and have fewer exemptions. This is a really good endeavor by the legislature looking at these exemptions.
All right, Sumner, thank you so much for joining us. It's great
Thank
seeing
you
you every Friday with the ABCs of the general excise